One of the keys to Apple is Apple's an incredibly collaborative company.
Good evening. I'm Steve Jobs from Apple Computer. We're very glad to be here tonight.
I think you always had to be a little different to buy an Apple computer. And I think you still have to think differently to buy an Apple computer. And I think the people that do buy them, they are the people that are not just out to get a job done, they're out to change the world.
What a computer is to me is it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with.
This is a story that dates back to 2010, back when the global voice assistant market was really just emerging as this high-stakes playground reserved for the absolute titans of tech. The kind of game where if you even dreamed of stepping in, you'd need at least a couple $100 million in your pocket for R&D alone, not to mention the brain power to pull it off. And the whole scene was dominated by these massive players like Google with their search empire, and Microsoft pushing early experiments in natural language, leaving everyone else scratching their heads wondering how to even get a foot in the door without getting crushed. Now, most companies back then would have looked at that landscape and said, hey, this is a battle for the big boys with endless resources and years of data hoarding. How are we supposed to compete as a hardware-focused outfit like Apple, especially with Steve Jobs battling health issues and the iPhone still finding its legs? Maybe we stick to what we know, polish our devices, keep things safe, and just focus on selling more gadgets to put food on the table for our teams and shareholders.
A few years ago, you gave a commemoration speech at Stanford to the graduating class. Now, a few years later, and a couple years wiser, would you add anything else to that speech that you gave a couple years ago?
But you know what Steve Jobs did? With Tim Cook right there back in the play as COO? He spotted this massive shift happening in how people were starting to interact with tech, moving away from clunky keyboards and screens toward voice commands that felt natural and hands-free. A change driven by a few key forces that were reshaping everything. First off, smartphones were exploding in popularity, turning pockets into portals where folks wanted instant answers without typing, like asking for directions while driving.
I have no idea. Probably I would just turn up the volume on it because the last few years have reminded me that life is fragile.
Setting reminders mid-conversation, and VoiceTac promised to make that seamless. Secondly, advances in machine learning were making speech recognition way more accurate, jumping from garbled misunderstandings to actually getting what you meant most of the time, thanks to better algorithms crunching audio data. And thirdly, privacy concerns were bubbling up even back then, with users getting wary of cloud-heavy systems that shipped every word off to distant servers. So on-device processing started looking like the holy grail for keeping things secure while still delivering smarts. So Jobs swooped in and acquired Siri Inc. in April 2010 for around $200 million, just 2 months after their app hit the App Store, folding it into the iPhone 4S by October 2011 and kicking off what felt like a revolution, where suddenly your phone wasn't just a tool, but a companion that listened and responded, putting Apple ahead of the pack and making us all feel like the future had arrived early. Fast forward through the years, though, and here's where the plot twists into this full-blown crisis by 2025. Tim Cook, now CEO since 2011, has poured billions into AI. We're talking over $10 billion since 2023 alone, and a whopping $500 billion committed to U.S. investments over the next 4 years, including massive AI pushes, snapping up 7 AI-focused companies just this year to beef up their game. But despite all that cash and hype around Apple Intelligence unveiled at WWDC 2024, things are unraveling because another epic shift hit the scene with ChatGPT in late 2022, flipping the script from basic voice commands to full-on generative AI that creates, reasons, and chats like a human. And Apple got caught flat-footed. Their privacy-first on-device approach that once seemed genius, now acting like a straitjacket, limiting the data floods needed to train these monster models. You see, while rivals like OpenAI, backed by Microsoft and Google, We're hoarding cloud data to build beasts that score 90% on coding benchmarks and 92% on reasoning tests. Apple's models are lagging at 82% and 75%, with Siri satisfaction plummeting 15% since ChatGPT's debut among its 500 million monthly users, half of whom can't even access the new features on older devices, feeling like they're paying top dollar for a Ferrari that's stuck revving in the garage. And the hits keep coming. Talents fleeing left and right, with over a dozen key AI staff bolting to Google and Meta since January 2025 alone. Folks like Kei Yang ditching his ChatGPT-like search role just weeks in, Jian Zhang from robotics, Ruming Pang, even whispers of replacing AI chief John Andrea after his team got stripped of oversight in April, all amid leaks of iOS 26.4 tests showing sluggish Siri responses that make you want to hurl your phone. Tim Cook's out there saying AI is as big or bigger than the internet and teasing more third-party integrations beyond OpenAI and Google Gemini. But Wall Street's getting antsy, with Apple stock down nearly 15% year-to-date, while Nvidia and Meta soar. Analysts wondering if Cook's got until 2026 before succession plans kick in full throttle. Especially with Siri 2.0 delayed yet again to spring 2026, leaving users like that Chicago mom Sarah frustrated when Siri pings her ex's birthday instead of soccer practice reminders, or Grandpa Joe in Florida chucking his device because it can't pull up grandkid photos right, highlighting this deep emotional betrayal, where we poured our lives into these ecosystems only to feel left behind in the AI race. It's like cognitive dissonance on steroids. We love the seamless Apple world, but hate the lag, clinging through loss aversion while FOMO pushes 25% of us to peek at Android rivals. And controversies pile on, from UK watchdogs fining them for overhyping unreleased features to their own June paper admitting AI collapses on complex logic, sparking media cries of fraud and blame games where Apple points to ethics while foes call it excuses. Yet amid the doom, there's this sliver of optimism. Cook's ramping up acquisitions and infrastructure, with hardware edges on 2 billion devices potentially flipping the script by mid-2026, boosting Siri to 90% satisfaction if they nail deeper Google ties and bold risks, as experts like Ethan Mollick whisper that Apple's chips could still crown them kings, turning this crisis into a wake-up call for us all to demand privacy without the lobotomy. Because at the end of the day, Apple's story isn't over. They're just human like the rest of us, flawed and fighting in a world where tech's promise keeps evolving faster than we can keep up.
The values that mean the most to him.
Everyone deserves a basic level of human rights, regardless of their color, regardless of their religion, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their gender.
There's resonance.
I have no idea. Probably I would just turn up the volume on it because the last few years have reminded me that life is fragile.
We will pave the sunlit path to justice. Thank you very much for this generous award. Thank you.
Hey, it's your name for hints, and if this hits home, like that unboxing rush turning to upgrade regret, drop your thoughts below. Still Team Apple or eye in the exit? Smash like, subscribe for more raw tech tales, and let's see if they pull off the comeback.